transition for what we have today. So essentially, we are here during this time slot. You all have made it, so we're definitely excited again. I can't stress that enough. So we're definitely talking about this topic when we think about inclusion in the workplace, in the office. So from the perspective of the employee, but I think a lot of times these things are transferable when we think about inclusion in our office, the job site, in the field. But a lot of times when you're thinking about that job as well, like what goes into the onboarding and as you navigate different situations and things of that nature. So again, not trying to steal the thunder from our moderator and our panelists, but just to set up this stage for you all. So again, quick rules, etiquette that we have. If you have any chats or the chat or comment, use those there. And then also too, any questions that you may have. So maybe it's something that I'm saying that you may have a question about, but any of our team or sports, like what they have to do so. So here in a moment, I introduce our moderator, and then he will introduce our panelists. And then they will have a 1 minute spiel about who they are and what they do. So again, thank you all for being here. So we have the pleasure of having Mr. Gary Morgan. The side note, these are the other events that we have as well. So this is next week on the 30th here. So I hope to see you all join again. And then the last one, which will be on the 7th of October. And the next slide should be Mr. Gary Morgan, where he serves in the Office of Inclusion and Diversity. So he's been there, part of that team, good colleague, and then also a good friend of mine as well outside of work. Our kids are the same age, so definitely enjoy Gary as far as being born in New York. I always tease him about that, and then making his way to North Carolina, and then all the way to the South, to Auburn now. So being in his role, he definitely does a lot of trainings and a lot of workshops around these topics, and definitely know he is giving his time to staff along with faculty, and then also to students. So I'm gonna pass it over to Gary and then get him to introduce himself and welcome him, and then also to our panelists, and then transition there.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Eric. That whole probate introduction. And so I appreciate you all for being here for this conversation today, for this panel discussion. What we know is that inclusion and belonging is meaningful for the ways in which employees experience the workplace. And so today you get the opportunity to hear from some leaders in the field in their specific organizations and how those individuals and their organizations are thinking about inclusion specifically for their employees. I want to add my welcome to Eric's welcome, because this is a great opportunity. We're going to ask that you use the chat function to submit any questions that you might have for our panelists. We have a list of questions, but we do believe that your question let's hear from our panelists. Let's get them introduced so we can get started. First on my list, I have Louise Duncan. Louise, do you want to give us an introduction? Did I drop out?
First, I need to start off by unmuting myself. I am with Alabama Power, and I am part of over the diversity and inclusion organization for them. And I also dotted line to our executive for Southern Company for overall diversity view for our company as a whole. And for Alabama Power, my responsibility is overseeing 6,400 employees that works with us and focus on the diversity piece of that. But for my background, I am an engineer major and business MBA as well. But people might say, how do you transition into HR? I spent over 20 some years in the field in many manager roles, leadership in our plants and throughout different operations, opcos, working in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and also Florida. And one of the things that throughout my leadership, my focus have always been in the diversity and inclusion as we develop our employees as they go through the pipeline and their growth. So with that, I was presented this opportunity in the latter part of 2018 to lead this organization, the first of it for Alabama Power, and really stand it up and stand our, what we call culture, CCI, Cultural Council and Inclusion, where I have 5 executives that sit on that council, and I lead them in overall diversity strategy for Alabama Power. So that's my overall responsibility and goal for Alabama Power.
Thank you so much, Louise. And you'll hear more from Louise momentarily. Next, we have Antoria Garrett.
Hello, my name is Antoria Garrett. I'm with Senior Solution Manager at the Coca-Cola Company, where I lead a large team that deliver like several capabilities and initiatives for the digital e-commerce platform. So specifically 2 areas that I focus on is for Amazon, the e-fulfillment space. I lead a team that essentially do all the technology to get our products to your door. And then I also lead a large team for data and analytics, which is the e-commerce data hub. And that essentially delivers like dashboard and reporting as it relates to all of our other, well, in addition to that, Amazon, but our e-commerce customers such as Walmart, Jet.com, GoPuff, and things of that nature. I am an Auburn grad, so I graduated from Auburn University in 2000 with an electrical engineering degree, and I'm an Alabama native. So born and raised in Anniston, Alabama. I am continuing to be involved in Auburn University, where I'm heavily involved with 100 Women Strong. And within last year, I was accepted as being on the executive board member, co-chair for rewards. And then I'm also involved with, serve on the advisory board for the Auburn University Special Projects and Initiatives. So I'm very happy to be here and look forward to all of your questions.
Thank you, Antoria. Jim Novellos, you're next.
Thanks, Gary. Hi, I'm Jim Nevelos. As you can tell from my Brooklyn accent, I'm not a native. I grew up in the UK. My father's actually an illegal immigrant from Eastern Europe. He then became a surgeon. I moved to the US 12 years ago. I'm an engineer by background, PhD in biomechanical engineering, but I've worked in various marketing functions, and now I head up research for our hip and knee replacement division. Very passionate on this topic. My wife is an engineer. I've had to watch what she's had to deal with through her career, and I run a team of 10 people with 3 people of color and 4 women with young kids, and I'm just determined to do whatever I can as an ally to try and make things better.
Thank you so much, Jim. So next we have Nicole Odom.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicole Odom. I am also a graduate of Auburn. I graduated actually twice with my bachelor's as well as my doctoral degree in materials engineering. When I graduated, I actually started, the company name has changed. Initially, we were ThyssenKrupp Steel, and then we were sold and bought out by a conglomerate of ArcelorMittal and Nippon Steel. So that's where the AMNS and the city that the plant is in Calvert. So that's where the name comes from. So when I initially started here, I was a technical engineer where I set up the processing for the mills to produce the customer material and fulfill the orders as the customer requested. And I was also heavily involved with commissioning our coating lines here for the steel products. But eventually they developed a product and development group, and I switched to that group. So now what I do is I introduce new products to the mill. So when Toyota or Honda is looking to produce their 2025 cars. They have material in mind, how strong they want it to be. So my job is to produce the material to what they're looking for. So it's a lot to do. I also sometimes deal with customer complaints and try to figure out what happened. Was it our fault or is it their fault? Those type things. So it's always busy here and I enjoy it. And I also have been married to another Auburn graduate, LeVar Odom, for 14 years, which is surprising. But we make it work, and we have one daughter, Taylor. We have a daughter, Taylor, and she's 9. And so we're still here in Mobile. So that's my spiel.
Thank you so much, Nicole. All right. Last but not least, we got Tom Garrett. Tom, introduce yourself, please.
It's an honor to be here, and I just want to welcome all the students too. And I love the AEP program, so I give a shout out to Dr. Brown right there. It's good seeing you in these COVID times. I haven't seen you, so it's good to see you. So yes, I work for Brassfield and Gorey. We're a construction company based in the Southeast. We got about 3,500 employees. We actually do physical construction. We don't just manage it, and that's important to us. I'll touch on that in a little bit. So I run our human resources area and our career development area. And this is just an incredibly important topic. I think for employers, it's an incredibly important topic. I think for us as human beings, it's an incredibly important topic. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. I think conversations are the key to moving forward and learning and listening. And I'm just really appreciative to be part of this panel today.
Thank you so much, Tom. So students in the room, folks in the room, I want you to listen for the nuance between these organizations as they talk about diversity, as they talk about inclusion, as they talk about belonging. And so without more to do, let's jump in. How does that sound, folks? So for the whole panel, let's go for the whole panel for this first one. How do you and your organization define inclusion? And how might that be different as a result of your context? Let's go with Antoria first. I think you might be muted, friend.
Well, one thing I'll say about Coca-Cola is that diversity and inclusion is heavily ingrained in pretty much everything that we do, especially with it being a global company. So there's many things that, when you think about defining inclusion, is that essentially that, uniqueness and, being able to have that ability to have that perception across, a variety of perceptions across all of the different people that you bring in. And it's very important for us to be able to bring in people that represent the communities that we serve. So it's incredibly important at Coca-Cola.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Let's jump to Nicole. What would you add?
Okay, so for our company, we're actually in the process of actually developing a whole and true definition for diversity and inclusion. So what we have done is we've begun to have these roundtable discussions with different members, team members, and their volunteer team members. And it's been so awesome because there have been so many people involved. And in these meetings, I know for me in particular, like my initial idea and understanding of diversity and inclusion was very narrow. Like it started only with mostly race and gender. But within those meetings, after hearing other team members' experiences here on site and like out in the world, you kind of, or what I've seen is that we're starting to expand what that actually includes. So we're still very new and still developing that definition as a company. So that's just where we are right now.
Thank you. Let's go with Jim.
Thanks, Gary. I think it's a tough question to answer. I didn't really talk about Stryker. It's a huge medtech company around the world, 15 billion in revenue. And I'm lucky I get to work with a lot of the global organizations. And what's very striking is how much of a difference there is in different areas. So, you know, the sales force in Europe and Australia is very diverse. In the US, it's 2% female. It's a challenge. And I actually don't like the term diversity and inclusion. I think it has to be inclusion and diversity. Because unless you have an inclusive environment, diversity is kind of meaningless. You hire people, it's not inclusive, they leave. So we're early on our journey as well. And we're listening a lot to our employee resource groups. I mean, for me, the acid test is something, if you're in a non-inclusive environment, it's like, I don't feel I can say anything. And when you feel like that, that stifles everything. That leads to groupthink. It leads to all sorts of other issues. So that's really where our start point is at the moment, is to really try and figure this out and lean on our employee resource groups and try and help us get better.
All right, thank you for that. Tom.
Thank you, Gary. Dang you, Jim, you just took what I was going to say too, because I noticed on your slide, Gary, that it said for Auburn University, inclusion and diversity. It hasn't always been that way, has it? Did it always start out as inclusion first?
No, so it used to be multicultural student affairs, but 4 years ago, we became inclusion and diversity.
Okay, well, and Jim, I totally agree with you. I'm on a learning journey here, and I think our definition is evolving, because I think certainly diversity is important, but to your point, diversity without inclusion is not much of a goal. Inclusion without diversity is not much of a goal either. They go together, but I like that idea of primacy, the thing you hear first, and I like putting inclusion first. And we that's what we believe. I'm getting my head around this. I think we're all getting our head around this. We're having just conversations too, Nicole, or with that, and Toria, that said that y'all are having conversations in your company. We're having lots of small group conversations so that we can understand it better. And I believe, and our companies believe in that inclusion. We have a saying in our company that everyone's a leader. We want everyone to feel like a leader. We don't want there to be this belief that there's leaders and followers. We want everyone to be empowered. So we use a lot of language. We push authority out very, very far in our organization. But we've never used that language along with inclusion. And we're a construction company, and I got to tell everybody straight. I mean, construction in the South is a kind of white male industry. I'm not very proud of that. And in our history, we've done a lot of our hiring of engineers from Auburn University, and well, the pool of engineers looks kind of like white males, and we're pretty heavy white male. That's pretty dissatisfying today. And so inclusion is a real effort and understanding to understand and make it different, make it where everybody has a voice, and reach out to those who might not quite yet feel like they have a voice, and help them believe that they have a voice. So it's I would say inclusion is a very active term.
Yeah, I like that. I like to talk about inclusion as a verb. And so Louise, why don't you round us out on this question? I think you're muted, friend.
You know, this 6-year-old, I gotta stay muted. Just like others have mentioned earlier, same here for Alabama Power, but it's definitely what Nicole has mentioned they're doing. We have, I set off that journey around all of Alabama Power, where we call it diversity and inclusion listening sessions, where we're opening up in these conversations with our leaders and our employees in a whole, so that we can give that charge not only into our leaders' hands, but our employees, because we're all part of this growth and how we can move forward. But as a company, like I mentioned earlier, but in 2018, they set out to establish the Council on Culture and Inclusion, and to work to ensure that all employees are valued, engaged, respected, and treated fairly. And that was our central focus and overall, and some of the key areas in which I set that charge at the beginning to focus in, start off employee count and representation, which is very key. And that's really, and when I say we set that in focus areas, it's not that we're doing great in that area or poor, we have room for growth. And there are some key areas to identify to move us forward. But some other areas, of course, within that diversity inclusion falls in it. We look at talent and leadership development. How are we developing our employees as they're growing so that they can see and look for diverse mindset, diverse mind, diverse opinions, those who think different than them, as how they hire them and bring them in, but talent itself. We also look at our concerns program under my umbrella, because we want to look at the consistency across the company, what's flowing through, and are our leaders aware of what our employees are submitting throughout consistently. And enterprise and events. One of the things is very key, as Alba Empower focus a lot internally. When we look at the inclusion piece of our company, we do care about our community, because we stand with our community and we're there in many of those conversations as we move forward, especially now, in these days, these last couple of months, we have led that charge, and especially with the city of Birmingham, we've partnered up with them for many years, but more and more this year alone, we're there to speak on a lot of things that we're doing, and a lot of things that we've seen, that opportunities of change that we need, and we need to be a voice in our community to advance change moving forward. And that is not just at Alabama Power, that is in Southern Company in a whole. Because Tom Fanning, our CEO, stands at that same charge, and we lead with his charge as well. And those are some of the things that he consistently do at a national level. So not just within the state of Alabama, but we look at it as a whole, how we represent ourselves internally for our company, but how we represent ourselves to our customers and our communities as well.
Folks on the call, students, I hope that you are strapped in, because this is already a great start. I have some notes already for myself, and I do this work on a regular basis, right? And so I want to drop some of the gems back at you just in case you missed them, right? And so recognizing that all of these companies have been on a journey thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that folks are expanding the ways in which they're thinking about diversity. And so I'm wondering, again, students, I want you to jump into the chat with your questions, but inclusion being primary as you are thinking about how do we bring diversity in, but inclusion, that active engagement of people, and then engagement through ERGs, right? And so I'm hoping that folks are thinking about the ways in which, what questions you might have. What questions you might have. Okay. All right, so let's go to our second question. I'll take three of you. Feel free to jump in. I think, Antoria, I'm going to start with you, right? And so what are innovative solutions that your company has implemented to foster an inclusive organization? I'll read that again. What innovative solutions has your company implemented to foster an inclusive organization?
So I'll say with Coca-Cola, like there's several things that we do. We essentially have like 8 BRGs, which is business resource groups. So they span across women. We have Women's Link, we have Asian, African American, KO-Gen, Hispanic, disability spelled THIS, then it's LGBTQA, and military veterans. And then we also have 3 diversity councils that we have that essentially everyone have somewhere that they can identify with. But I would say one of the innovative things that I think that has come out of having different groups that are established at Coca-Cola is our Stand as One circles. Like it's similar to what was answered, I believe, by Nicole as well as from Louise, but our Stand as One was established it started off with like the mass shootings, and then it also with the Me Too, and then now, most recently with the social injustice. But it's like essentially ways that we can be inclusive with our leaders to be able to express like how we're feeling about certain topics without it being deemed as being unprofessional, but having ways that you can be inclusive and be able to express your point of view of how you're feeling from your, from your perspective, and be able to essentially allow others who may not experience, the culture that you're experiencing, or to be able to essentially relate and become allies and become ambassadors and advocates of what you essentially stand for. And I'll even give the example of the Me Too program. I mean, it was essentially a lot of white males that was very uncomfortable with the topic at the time, and starting to have some of them be involved with some of the conversations. They some of our Caucasian senior leaders start becoming mentors for women, and as well as being able to become reverse mentors for them. I'll give another example with our millennial voices. They started a program where they conduct reverse mentoring to our senior leaders to be able to give a perspective from our current generation.
Thank you. Thank you. Jim, you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. Actually, some remarkable parallels with what Antoria was talking about. So, Strike is a sales-led company. It used to be the case VP would walk around, see you were still there, chair at 5:30, and it's just just the usual nonsense. But we have very similar breakdowns of employee resource groups. But actually, one of the things I've been the biggest supporter of is we've always had a Striker Women's Network, which is a great organization. But more recently, we've had a Women in Science and Engineering, ERG. And some people said, well, why do you need that when you have Striker Women's Network? And the fact is, it's very different personalities in sales and marketing versus engineering. So the Striker Women's Network will have a networking event, and there'll be 150 people milling around, and a lot of the engineers are like, that is my idea of hell. I have no interest in doing that kind of thing. I'll be honest, I'm one of them. And I think one of the things I was most impressed with WISE was they arranged this initiative called Lean In Circles, where we were just divided up into groups, small groups, about 8, 9, 10. We take an hour a month to sit, and it's very much this, the safe space where you can say something. The enemies of inclusion are assumed knowledge and unchallenged behaviors. This whole, oh, well, you never said anything. It's like, well, I didn't feel I could. And that's when it gets really awkward. So by having these sort of lean in circles, you can have these discussions. And, if there is a behavior of somebody on a team that's just, causing a problem, it's a way of dealing with that in a easier, less sensitive way. So I've been a huge fan of that, and it's hard. The idea of reverse mentoring, I think, is important. We do have a council of young professionals, which do explain to the old white guys at the top that, hey, this is us. So these are small things that make a big difference.
Jim, I'm going to encourage you to, in the chat, drop what is the enemy of inclusion. I think that's chat worthy, friend. Louise, you want to share your thoughts on innovative solutions?
Yes. So similar to what Coca-Cola is doing, Southern Company, different opcos, we have our ERGs throughout those companies, and some of the same identified groups as what Antoria spoke of. But one of the things that is different for Alabama Power, even though it's going on around us, ERGs are there, we do not have one. And so that is something I am actually presenting to our management council and explaining that footprint on the benefit for it, the reasons why, and the overall goal that what it can bring to us. But what we have done already is we have groups such as called culture committees throughout. Well, different work groups or work locations are equipped with employees that are part of that committee, diverse group from different areas within that organization. They can bring in their mind and thought, and we can go to them with questions and ask of opportunities or solutions for some areas in which we need, especially when we do poll our employees with voice and employee surveys. We can take that to those committees throughout. And also we have a millennial task force that's brought together of that represents all the different organizations within Alabama Power that we work with as well, to look at and again ask. And some other innovative things that we've done along with those listening sessions, which was key. We as a company have gone so many years telling our leaders to avoid topics such as race, religion, and having those conversations. And we have avoided that. And I'm not ashamed to say that, but it's not something that was good, because the conversation was still being had within our organizations, and it was causing animosity within our work group. So with that, the listening sessions is a way of not just telling our leaders you're going through a training, we actually expose them to conversations that was facilitated by myself and another external vendor, where we work with the leaders and said, hey, here's the opportunity to ask those difficult questions, or how can you navigate through challenges such that you will see moving forward. And then also, like in last year when we focused on a lot about the Me Too movement, I did a lot of facilitated discussions with white males throughout an organization. And that was something very, people say, are you sure you want to take that on? And I said, well, if we do not, we're running from it, because we're avoiding their concerns and how they can integrate within their work group and within this organization. We do not want them to feel like they're not included, because they are included, but they have valid concerns through those challenges. So those are a lot of things that, you know, with the changes and the things that we have been given to us that we are facing internally, but also external outside of us, we're able to face those changes and step up to those challenges as we move forward and learn with it and grow with it along the way.
So I got caught up taking notes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got caught up taking notes, y'all. I have a question for the panel. And students, I have a question for you in the chat, right? So what do you want to see from a future employer? But I'm interested to hear from our panelists, and Nicole, we'll start with you. How is your organization engaging majority groups, right? So folks who experience advantages in our society, how are you engaging them in creating inclusion in your organization?
Can you go a little?
Yeah.
Explain a little more.
Yeah. So the conversation that we just heard around how do we engage potentially white males or white folks in the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So how are you? Are you good?
Yeah. So
okay,
right, like I mentioned earlier, we're still very new with this, and I think that our roundtable discussions that we were having kind of opened the door for us to do a little more discussion. And I think too, I also wanted to add to that our company is a little different because we are a joint venture. So it's not, there is race issues here, yes, but there are also cultural issues here because initially, as I said, we started at ThyssenKrupp. And ThyssenKrupp is a German company. So there were a number of Germans here teaching and explaining, but there were also people that migrated here because it was a green field at the time that had experience from working in America. And so it was a mixed pot here. So there was always kind of a diverse workforce here. And so we've been pretty good with that. And now that we have the Nippon Steel portion, there are Japanese here, and they're more geared towards our technology. And so there's always a diverse meeting and room. And it's amazing how tolerant some people are. And then there are those that aren't as tolerant. So we're still working to trying to figure that portion out. So we haven't completely defined everything yet. And I'm taking notes too, because we are still, you know, defining everything. And I like the groups that Antoria was saying that Coca-Cola has for, and Jim was saying for safe spaces for people to discuss things. And you saw that in the round tables that we were having. And so that's kind of where we are now.
Thank you for that transparency. Tom, you want to jump in on this question? I saw you smiling earlier.
Yeah, I'd love to. Good, thanks. Such an important topic, engaging the majority. So I walk around all day long with the majority. And I want to give hope to the students in what I kind of believe is happening in corporate America. Our friends on this panel at Coca-Cola and Southern Company have been on this journey longer than us, and have led the way in many ways. And we partner with Southern Company. They're actually a client of ours. One thing that's so cool about Southern Company is they give away knowledge. They want everybody to benefit from the journey they've been on, and you give it away, and it's really cool. What I think is happening in corporate America that's exciting to me personally is an awakening. And what I mean by that, I made an analogy of my college days, and believe I'm an engineer too, by the way. You can end up in HR from engineering. I'm a very proud Auburn engineer. Is that I don't know, in companies like ours, diversity has always been an important topic, but it's kind of like laundry. Laundry is important, but it can sit in your closet kind of, and you can come up with other things that you need to do, and you're going to get to the laundry, but it's maybe not the most important thing you're going to do this weekend. To now, it's like there's an awakening in corporate America. I think that feels a lot like, oh, wow, we got this wrong. And now it's more, instead of being laundry, it's much more like a mastery of a subject that you got to take a test on to get admitted into a program that you really want in, and you don't have mastery. And you are seeking to learn what you don't know because this is the highest thing on your list. This is the number one thing for our CEO. That it is, he doesn't want to be like this in 10 years, in 5 years. So it is an urgent matter to get better. So we're doing a lot of listening, and it matters. And we're, when you start talking like that, the majority kind of, at least they go, what's going on? What is this? And we believe, well, we have 4 strategic initiatives for our company next year, a total of 4. And diversity inclusion is one of them. Every business unit has to have a core element in their business plan that includes diversity inclusion. From recruiting, from discussions, from meeting, from planning, from a strategy, to work with outside business partners. So we've gone from it kind of being laundry to being, it is top notch, top on the list of every business unit leader in our company. That, I believe, is kind of what's going on with the majority. I'm hoping it's going on everywhere.
Sounds like tying it into the business, right? Victoria, you want to jump in on this question? Engage in the majority.
Can you repeat the question, Gary? I'm trying to make sure that
I'll do my best. It was an add-on. My brain did that one. So how do we as we think about creating inclusion, what are some tactics that your organization is doing to engage the majority group? So heterosexual folks, men, Christians, however your organization is defining that.
Okay, yeah. So I know there's several things that's been, you know, established. Like, for example, there's a lot of like marketing and analysis that's been going around regarding, like, for example, women conduct a lot of the household purchasing. So there's a lot of initiatives that are going on with ensuring that there's, you know, equity across how, you know, like as far as the gender gap, as far as like the number of representation of you know, whether it's women, like 50%, you know, 50% women across our organization. and things of that nature that's been happening across across the organization. So like some of the things that Coke has been doing is that I see where we've achieved it across in like the mid-management and management level as far as getting to that. Yeah, I think it was like 50% by 2020 as far as having, you know, equal number of women versus men, you know, within our workforce. But, you know, similar to some of the others, you know, there's still some opportunities that that I still see that's required, you know, when it comes to the C-suite and the board of directors level. However, there is a lot of focus around, you know, from, you know, if you think about from, you know, the majority and ensuring that, you know, our talent management as well as, you know, equity in regards to our pay is very much focused by our HR. You know, they actually have programs that does algorithms, even as far as ensuring that how our job descriptions are, you know, ensuring that it's not being, you know, indirectly, inadvertently being unconscious bias and luring in certain types of people that, that will mutually exclude like some of the other groups. So those are some of the things that we're doing on the Coke side.
Thank you for that. It looks like we have a question. I'm looking for an employer. Can you all hear me? Yeah. I'm looking for an employer who has felt some level of imposter syndrome, and I'm hoping companies are welcoming towards new and different employees. And so how does an organization work with someone who might be experiencing this feeling of I'm an imposter, and how did I get here? Right, specifically in this role. Louise, you look excited, and so I'm gonna jump to you first.
I think I kind of make sure I answer it right, but I believe I'm understanding it. One of the questions that we ask our employees in the whole Alabama Power and Southern Company is, do you mask yourself? Are you bringing your true self to work? And through that, many of our leaders have learned, and even leaders themselves have communicated it to me and many others, that they have masked themselves. And how you create an environment where employees feel like they can be who they are to be able to perform at that level in which we need to be. And doing that and identifying and hearing it, listening for one, and really taking in and looking for solutions for that, that's our priority. Now, for us, has our company made some of those transitions in the past and currently? Yes, we've had many employees to be able to feel comfortable in certain areas, but we have identified where there's pockets within our organizations where employees really, it hasn't been set clear. Again, we're a power industry, utility industry. I am an engineer myself, being in HR. I come from working in many of our fields and plants and in those areas where that is still somewhat disconnected to the life of what corporate has transitioned into. And so that is where our outreach, not just in corporate side America, as they say, but also in the field side. So therefore, we can translate that and communicate that for our employees. But to go along with that, we have to identify our leaders that are not on board so that employees can be encouraged, or we can welcome in new thought. And so those are some of those things that we have really looked at when I talked about our talent and development of our employees and our leaders. Who is leading our teams? That's important, because again, it's so important that we hire our employees and look and recruit those with different thought and different mindset, because that's how that moves us forward and moves that needle. And so when we look at our marketing side, our innovative side, and our company and our groups there, we definitely went outside of that that norm for us. And we have to be encouraging too. And also coming into the mindset of COVID-19, for a utility industry, working remotely, that's not really heard of. We have faced that challenge, and with that, we've learned a lot from it. And many of our leaders in the past were like, no, we can't do that remotely. We can't work from home. We can. And we've seen that, we've met those challenges, and we're still looking for opportunities to further advance that beyond when we do return. Currently, right now, majority of our workforce has not returned back to the office. Only those who are in the fields are still there, like in our plants. Those that reporting to storm duty, to recovery of many of our outages and things of that nature, they're doing that, they're there. But we're looking at those opportunities as we move forward, that new age, new time, we should transition ourselves and be different in that utility mindset. But it also helps when we're recruiting new potential employers to our company, because they look for that, a different work-life balance. And that alone can help that in as in our recruitment and our retention, because that's something I focus on too, looking at the 3 to 5 year retention rate. So yes, and opportunities to grow, to continue to welcome employers that of different thoughts, mindset, looks, and anything of that nature, of their comfort and feeling included in our company as a whole.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to jump in on this? Go ahead, Tom. It's on you.
I'll go fast. I am so, I'm taking it. A student asked about imposter syndrome. Correct? Is that right? When I heard that, okay, Tom, you got to take it up a notch, because they're bringing advanced topics. I only learned about imposter syndrome like 3 or 4 years ago, and y'all already have that in mind. So here's what I want to say about that. I really think almost everybody either has imposter syndrome or they're wildly overconfident. There's very few that really can match up their skill level with what's needed and feel good where they are. So I don't want anyone to feel totally discouraged. It's actually pretty common, and the way we address it, we teach this to our leaders, that the job of a leader is to encourage the heart of their team, that you got to breathe confidence into your team. You got to challenge them too to grow, because sometimes as a coach, you see them where they don't even see themselves. But it's the job of the leader to breathe that confidence and draw out that imposter syndrome. I've just seen it so many times where somebody will kind of finally confess, I kind of don't think I belong, or I have doubts that I belong. And unless you can get that openness between, somebody can say to that other coworker, of course you belong, of course you belong. But it's nothing like the leader saying to that person, you do belong, you do belong. You're as talented as anybody. And so I think that's a leadership role, to breathe that into people.
Anybody else want to jump in on imposter syndrome? Go ahead, Jim.
So I'm going to take a slight turn. That's all very well said. It is, you know, the ultimate step of knowing you have an inclusive environment is when you have authenticity, when people feel they can be their true selves. And it's a very well-worn management slide. You know, you go from unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious competence. And it's, you know, I've used that, you know, analogy a lot. And that's the journey that we're on. I mean, as an organization, you know, it's been mentioned before, like we were, you know, a sales-led organization. If we're hitting the numbers, everyone's like, what's the problem with hitting the numbers? And then, you know, there is an awakening, there's a very rude awakening going on right now in, you know, in the US. So I would echo what a lot of has been said. You know, we're sort of conscious incompetence now, trying to encourage people to be their authentic selves. Like I've said before, you know, I don't feel I can say anything. That is a horrible thing to say. And, you know, it's again, providing safe space, making sure people feel valued, and just like everyone being a leader it's a great analogy. I use the analogy, there's 2 types of leaders. There's an NFL coach type, where not only does that person pick the team, the formation, but they also pick the play, like you run here and then catch the ball. Or there's a soccer coach where it's like, well, pick the team, I'll pick the formation, then you guys just go. And I'll shout some encouragement from the side. And I much prefer the second option in the workplace. I like the NFL, please don't think I don't. But I think it's all part and parcel of that same thing, that just to feel included, to feel empowered, to then feel authentic is kind of like the tip of the pyramid.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, this is football country, friend.
Gary, I would like to jump in on that one, but from a different perspective. I like to jump in on when I actually felt like I had imposter syndrome. And I'm going to probably divert a little bit, because this is like when I first, you know, I know I'm representing Coca-Cola, but I worked for Kimberly-Clark Corporation for 11 years. And although I'm in IT now, I started off as, you know, truly working and doing, doing control systems and writing, you know, logic for the base machines at Kimberly-Clark. And I remember as a young engineer, you know, joining the team, I was the only African-American, I was the only woman, I was the youngest. And I started off in the manufacturing facilities with primarily older Caucasian men. And I literally felt like I initially did not belong. And I had moments where I'm like the one who building out and designing these different solutions, where I'm literally at the plant telling, you know, men who's probably, you know, double to triple my age, exactly what they need to do. And I think in that moment, it did, similar to what some of the others were saying, that it did take the leadership of like, who was the engineering lead, to help support me in that moment, to start making me feel included and feel like I belong. Because even some of, you know, the jokes or whatever, and you'll try to blend in, but I literally did not feel like it at the time. So I do think that having that level of leadership and, you know, awareness of it, and I teased them because I told them that they all became my uncles and my stepdads or whatever, but they all essentially eventually took me under their wing as, you know, their daughter. But for me, I just remember in that moment, almost literally ready to quit my job until I had that moment of where they started embracing me and started making me feel included. And I think one thing that was most important, that I showed that I was willing to learn. I didn't come in, you know, as if I knew everything, especially working with a lot of, you know, the people who work on the floor who may have been working there 30 years, they may not necessarily have a degree, but I came in, you know, humble and, you know, worked with them. So some of them, I became their adopted child there as well. But I just wanted to jump in on that because I just remember that feeling myself at one point in my career.
And Toria, I thank you for that. And you must have anticipated the shift that comes with this next question. Yeah, oh yeah, they want some realness from y'all. Here we go. So the question that's on the table is, so understanding that your organizations have been on a journey, how has your personal and professional journey, I guess, been integrated or informed by one another? So your professional and personal diversity journey, how have those two been informed? Nicole, you want to get started, friend?
Sure.
Okay.
If I'm answering this correctly, so like I said, our company is very unique. So I kind of saw both sides. So I saw what Antoria just described firsthand. You're coming in, you're a young engineer, and you're telling the operators what they need to do, and they don't really like that, and especially if you don't look like them. However, my working group was so diverse that we kind of felt it together. So it wasn't just me against the operators or like just having that one feeling. So like, let me explain my working group for a couple of years. So there was an engineer from Ghana, there was engineer from Bangladesh. Of course, I already mentioned the Germans, Japanese, Indians. So it was very diverse, and they saw the same things when they went out into the mill. So I think our company is a little different because we do have there's a different level of diversity and inclusion that we see. So most of the operators, they are white young males, and they don't really want to hear from the Japanese, from African Americans, and especially women here. So it's all I've just had a mixed view. So it's not good, it's not bad, but I have learned, like Antoria said, I did learn early on how to interact with people to get the job done. So that's my take on it. I hope I answered it correctly.
So I'm gonna hold you a little bit, right? And so what
Okay. Okay.
this I guess this is my role as the moderator, right? And so what I guess what I'm reading from this question is, so you've had this really diverse experience, right, with your work group. What did you pick up from that? How did that inform your diversity journey and your understanding of diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
And again, like I said, when we are starting these discussions, my definition was still race and gender. So even though I was in that diverse work group, for whatever reason, I still had those same ideas. And it wasn't until I kind of got into that round table discussion, and start seeing the details concerning diversity, my definition still hadn't changed. I guess because I was just so focused on getting the job done, and I didn't have any issues with my diverse working group. So to me, it was that was just a roadblock that I got over. So I guess I didn't, I don't know if that's not everyone's experience. Like some people have it differently, and I don't know if that's just my thought process or what, but that's just how it was for me. Yeah. And I think too that my graduate education at Auburn, being around a number of diverse people too, kind of set me up for that. So I wasn't as timid or intimidated once I got to a workplace that was still diverse. I still knew how to maneuver. And so for me, and I may be a special case, it just wasn't an issue for me.
Yeah, and not everybody's gonna walk into that level of work group, but I think that's important that you had that though. Jim, you want to jump in on this question?
Sure. I mean, I'd echo a lot of that. I mean, imposter syndrome doesn't go away just because you happen to be, white and male, what have you. I mean, the biggest influence on me, as I said, then, and it was, it's pretty much when I vowed if ever I was in charge of a group, I would never allow that kind of culture. And I grew up in the north of England, in a town called Bradford, and quite a lot of Indians and Pakistanis there. It's a different, but it's the same ingrained racism that I saw everywhere growing up. And like I said, my dad was from Eastern Europe. So it's always been there. I think the biggest, going back to imposter syndrome, the week after I moved, I was in a meeting with all of our top consultants, like Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, big names. And if it hadn't been for my manager then, who was so supportive and so encouraging, who was like, no, you know your stuff, you can talk back to these guys, I wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes. You know, I actually told one of the main surgeons of the Mayo Clinic he was wrong about something, and the whole room just stopped. That was a formative moment. But it is, you know, to add to the earlier point, this is the job that you have. You have to, you know, make people feel like, no, you belong here. You know, it's like if you're good enough, you're old enough, or you're, you know, there's no reason not to feel confident. But it's tough when you're the only one. Tori, I can only imagine what that was like. You know, in the first few days, like, oh, good God.
So let's jump to Antoria, right? So what we've heard is, I have my own experience, but I'm also and Jim, I think you said this perfectly about, even if it's not my experience, I'm able to watch somebody who's close to me. I can watch their experience, right? And that also informs my professional and personal journey around diversity. Antoria, how has your personal and professional journey been interact to inform your view about diversity and inclusion?
Well, I will say that just even in my upbringing, I was at a majority Caucasian school, and then, you know, I went to Auburn University, where, you know, there was a balance of, you know, diversity. And then just even my work friends, I tend to have very diverse friends, you know, whether it's at work or personally. So similar to some of the other reactions, is that I've always had somewhat of a balance, I guess you would say, you know, from the perspective of diversity, and, you know, have, you know, as far as different perspectives and different views and different backgrounds and walks of life. So it wasn't, you know, as you know, with the exception of, you know, the being the, you know, fresh out of college engineer, for the most part, my experience from a diversity perspective has been really good, you know, because of my balance and being accustomed to having an atmosphere, or, you know, in my personal life as well as my professional life, having that balance.
Yes. Tom, on you, friend.
Well, gosh. So it is true. Someone said, maybe Jim, I guess Jim said it, white males have imposter syndrome too. I have had it much of my career. But I guess I'll go back to I think the question, and Gary, I'm going to ask you to confirm. The question really is, how has our personal journey influenced our professional journey, and how has our professional journey influenced our personal journey in the area of diversity and inclusion?
Exactly.
Right?
That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
Well, I'm gonna sum it up in a story. I have a black man, gentleman that works with me and my team, and he is what we call a personal development manager, and his job is to be available for employees to talk to in private, to discuss things, to help them with challenges, where it could be home personal challenges. It really is a lot of it personal challenges. But we're very close, and we talk a lot, and we certainly have had a lot of conversations through these last 2 months or so with so many things that have been brought to my eyes. And so I've asked him questions, and I've been reading a lot. And I said to him, really, for the first time, do I understand that the Declaration of Independence means something different for me than it does you? And he said, okay, well, I'm glad you see that. And I said, yeah, but I'm kind of ashamed. And he said, well, you don't need to be. If you didn't see it, you didn't see it. And so he gave me that, and it bothered me all night long. And I had to talk to him the next day about it. And I said, you gave me a pass, and I appreciated it. But the truth is, I did know it. I did know it meant something different for people of color in this country. I just chose to put it over there and not let it bother me. And now it deeply bothers me. And so I don't know whether that's a personal journey, it's affecting my professional life, or it's a professional life affecting my personal life. But once you see something, you can't unsee it. And that's the fact that we can talk about that, and he didn't make me feel terrible about it, and I could express what I said to him. I see the personal and the professional coming together in this humanity conversation that we're having in ways that I've certainly not been involved with before.
Okay. Okay. Louise, round out this question, friend. Round it out. This is good. There are gems all day long, y'all.
Well, similar to Antoria, and for many of you don't know, me and Antoria finished Auburn together. We were actually in electrical engineering studies together, hand in hand. And we were very, very few of us there as far as female in there. And as I left to go work for the company, Southern Company at that time, as a field engineer, the organization I was a part of, or the group I was with as a field engineer, I was the only female and the only Black individual for that group. So imagine me supporting our plants throughout the system, me going in, telling operators what went wrong and how to get a unit back up and running. For some time, people refused to take that from me. And it was a long road where some of my, not necessarily peers, because everybody worked with me were more senior, and I'm fresh out of college. They could not see the problem at first. And it went for about a while, to the point where I thought about just leaving and going to work for another company because I was being recruited at that time. But it was a admin in that organization that pulled me aside and said, they need you more than you need them. And it took me a long time to figure that out. She said, I know you have it, I just need you to use it. And so what she meant by that, I did not mention earlier, y'all, I served in the military as well, Air Force. So I developed a lot of the leadership and that tough skin in that role, because also in the military, the group I was part of heavily, I was the only young individual that was in that communication flight, and that I dealt with communications, top secret stuff, but that I was it, and the young female by herself. So what I learned from there is don't give up, which I was taught for years, to just go face adversity and, utilize my allies to help gain my advantage. So instead of shielding the things that were happening to me, I start sharing it to some people that I can rely on, and they became an advocate for me. So therefore they became my voice at first, and then over time, my voice, it exchanged, and then my voice was it, to the point where, when you're getting called out in the middle of the night to respond to a unit being down, they want you. An operator calling me firsthand, like, hey, this is what I got, because they realize technically very sound in knowledge and can do it and save them more time. And fast forward on, also in my career, as I developed as a technical field engineer, that's all I wanted to do. I didn't want no parts of leadership. But it was someone that came knocking on my door saying I need to go in the leadership role, because again, it kept saying I have something that I need to share. And I said, surely that's not me, because equipment it's easier to deal with equipment to me than people. And for all of you, when they talk about diversity and inclusion, that's diversity in itself. Learning how to work with people. And that is something I had to learn, that when I transitioned into that world, the reasons why they wanted me is why I'm here today in this role. Even though I'm so technically into the focus of the utility, the electrical, and all of that, I do care about the person in front of me. To get to a solution and get resolution on any issue, it could be technically sound, but if you care about the person in front of you that is working with you, you can get there faster. because you given true feeling like they're part of it and you are listening to them. Because I always tell people, when a conversation you are having, are you really listening to that person, or are you listening to them just to respond, to not really hear what's being said? So personally, I've had some things that really felt like I'm being shut out or I should leave, but I also learned from there that it's not necessarily greener on the other side. So learn from it and try to utilize those that can advocate for me and be my voice to help give me that leverage and what I need so that I can be at the table. And lastly, once I got into leadership roles, I found myself the only one at the table. When you're at a plant and you're second in charge and you're the only female and only minority at that table, and it's all white men, everyone at that plant is looking for you to be that person of change. So one of the things I've always kind of lived by is a Gandhi quote. And it is, be the change you wish to see in the world. And out of that, I have to remind myself, and I put it everywhere, every office I've gone to, every move I've made, I put that statement. But what I highlight is, be the change you wish to see. So instead of me leaving something because I'm like exhausted, because right now in this role right now, it is exhausting. It is time consuming, but I cannot walk away from it, because to see change and be a part of it, I have to be willing to put in the work to help. So that is how my experiences with the company, internal and also external, personal, have grown and caused me to see the difference in diversity and also in inclusion, and also giving others an opportunity and understanding their experiences is the reason why they have the belief that they have. And to change that, you have to give them another experience to be able to set that platform of difference.
Absolutely. So good people, we have 10 minutes left. So if you have other questions, please find your way into my private messenger. But I have a question that I'm going to link to one of our prior questions. And so the question that's on the table, the question that's on the table is, what's the role that leadership and management and mentorship has played in your career? But what I also want to think about, actually, let's just go with that question. Let's go Nicole, Jim, and Antoria. Does that work? And then we'll do our final question. No dice, Nicole? I didn't say you had to go first, friend. You don't gotta go first. Let's go with Antoria.
Okay, you said what role does management and mentorship?
Leadership and mentorship, yeah.
Leadership. I would say for me, it's worked out extremely well for really. I would say for me, it's worked out really well because I sought to have very diverse mentors and sponsorship throughout my career. And some of the things that I learned, like, well, for example, I had an older Caucasian male as a mentor. And then in my women, I'm heavily involved with women in STEM as well as women in Coca-Cola Women in Technology. And it was the president of that leadership, the president of the Women in Technology. And she was an African-American female. And I've also had a Caucasian female as my mentor. And I would say that being able to get glean some of the different perspectives on how, like, some of the key things I need to do, whether it's like how I lead my team, how I, expose myself. Because I was one of those people who just assumed that if you do a great job, you'll get promoted, people will see the things that you're doing, and you will get recognized, and you will move up the ladder, that way. And, with some of the feedback that I had gotten was that I realized that I did need to do a lot more, highly, do a lot more highly visible, because to, I think it was Louise's point, when you have great mentors, you can do great work, but you really need somebody who's like behind the closed door, especially during like calibration sessions, or whenever there's like a, highly visible or great project, like even the ones I'm doing now with across e-commerce. Like it was literally my mentor who knew exactly, the type of work that the type of output that I have with leading large teams, was that with COVID, I was brought in basically to stand up this team to do more direct to consumer, because essentially for our food service, you think about restaurants are shut down, restaurants, concerts, all the things that Coca-Cola are highly known for as far as selling our products. I was brought in to help support, do the e-fulfillment, to direct to consumer components of it, and then also glean some of the data analytics, that comes with that. So sometimes you have to have some of those people that's talking in the background and talking on your behalf, and that will allow you to excel and get into those additional, have those additional leadership, opportunities.
Thank you for that. So Jim, quick version of mentorship and leadership in your career.
So I think mentorship is critically important both ways. So I said earlier on that, unchallenged behavior is one of the enemies of inclusion. Well, what if it's your own behavior? You need a good mentor who's going to say, do more of this, do less of that. I did struggle with corporate America when I first moved over. Things that are completely acceptable in a meeting in Europe, I found out very quickly, just will not fly. And, you need those people who can sit down with a cup of coffee and just say, hey, just so you know. And it all comes back to the same thing. It's that safe space. And, over the last couple of years, I've been mentoring a couple of younger, actually female engineers on the team. And I learn as much from them as they may learn from me. It's a complete myth that a mentorship is a one-way thing. And it honestly, selfishly helps me stay current as well. I mean, I have no idea what it's like to be a 20-something female engineer with X amount of college debt. I grew up in a different country at a different time. I need to understand, the world, and the world that I now live in over here. It's completely different. So, one acid test is, if you ask someone like me, I'm in my mid-40s, how many really great managers have you had? You'll get one or two names, and then there'll be a pause. It's actually quite uniform that I could think of two really great managers, and then I have to really think and go down the secondary list. So when you find a great manager that's also a mentor, that's just a really great thing to be cherished. And if you're working with someone who's not that great, that's when mentorship becomes even more important, to be able to find the right people. And it's something you have to do proactively. It's not something people just say, here's your perfect mentor. And that's when, having some kind of a network is important. And that's where the, employee resource groups are also very helpful, because getting involved in WISE was how I then got involved with mentoring 2 or 3 of these other, just fantastic young people.
Right. So Nicole, I'm gonna save you, friend, because we're running short on time. I'm gonna save you. But go ahead.
I did want to respond, because my response is kind of different, because I technically can say that I've never had a formal mentor. But what I have had is a director, or my boss, who started as my boss, who switched to another department and was not my boss or manager, and then developed the group that I'm in now. And he pulled me back in, and he's somewhat of my advocate here on site. But I kind of, in the meantime, I've been pulling from everyone. So it's not just like my manager or my director himself, I would pull from the operators because some of them have more experience running the line than I would. They come from other places. So I would pull information from them and kind of get on good terms with them. And a lot of them I would bribe with food to get stuff done to kind of open the door. But that's how it works, you know. And they're advocates for me too now. So I kind of have a range of advocates, but I never really had like a formal mentor that I would sit down with and have discussions with, because I really haven't seen anyone in my position or with my education and background. So I kind of just pull from everywhere, and I'm not sure how great that is. But on the flip side, it's great that I'm at a company where I can do that, where I can pull from different people.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be mindful of time, right? So we have 1 minute left. And what I want to do is get a 30-second wrap up from you all around diversity and inclusion. This is going to be the only time that I've been a stickler for time all day. And so I'm giving you 30 seconds. This is your 30-second takeaway. Tom, you want to get us started? 30 seconds.
Yes, my wrap up is, I believe we're all in this together. Humanity matters. And you all can make a difference. Each of us can reach out to somebody and practice inclusion today. There's somebody in your life, in your world, in your vicinity that we each can be more inclusive towards. So let's just all be in this together.
Thank you, Tom. Wisdom. Luis.
I'm going to stick to what I closed out earlier, is be the change you wish to see in this world.
Absolutely.
You are in charge of that. Diversity and inclusion does not sit in the title of an individual role. Like I tell people, just because I oversee that organization for Alabama Power, it doesn't sit solely in my realm. All of us have that responsibility. So be that person. If you don't do anything else, and seek to understand and have grace for others, and take time to get to know others, because that also has an impact on your decisions that you make moving forward.
Thank you. Nicole.
So I would say that it's very important to have discussions without judgment in order to move your growth forward with inclusion and diversity. So you must have those discussions, those hard discussions, but without judgment.
Thank you. Jim.
I think I've used more than my share of speaking time today. I would just echo particularly what Louise has said, and please help educate the white guys. You know, don't underestimate that. Like I said, these unchallenged behaviors and assumed knowledge, that we need help to know that too. Please, please do it in a safe space. Don't shout it across the cafeteria. But please, it's important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. And then last but not least, Antoria.
I would just say, just continue to be open for, open to everyone. We all have our very uniqueness about each other, where we come from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different perceptions. So just be open to everyone's perspective. Everyone have essentially a voice, and pretty much, I think what was it, Louise pretty much summed it up for all, for all of us. I just think that, yeah.
Well, I want to thank this panel. I think you all did a wonderful job providing these students and our participants today with some wonderful advice and insight around diversity, equity, and inclusion as they think about their next role and their careers moving forward. I believe that this is being recorded, and so you may have access after the fact. In addition to that, I believe our panelists' contact information will be sent to you all, folks who participated in today's conversation, so you may be able to follow up in that way. So with that, I want to say good night. Thank you for your time and your attention today. And so have a great night.